Hello and welcome. In this video, we are going to build this GoDaddy portfolio website with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. After building this portfolio website, you can host it on GoDaddy for just $3 per month. So for this $3 per month, you are going to get a free domain. I'll leave a link somewhere in the description where you can get this great offer. Remember, this video is not sponsored by GoDaddy. Now let's quickly go to the portfolio website you're going to build in this video. At the top, we have our navigation, a logo at the left, and menus at the right. We have this icon to toggle between light mode and dark mode. And at the left here, we have some contents. We have Alex, a developer or designer, and some few description. And we have a button here with a text "Hi me." At the down, we have some social media handles, Instagram, Facebook, and GitHub. And we have a picture of Alex here. We have this icon here which can change different colors of the website. So let me choose this, and when I scroll it would slide in. So let's click on the about to go to the about section. You can see this nice animation here. We have a picture of Alex also here that slides in from the left to the right, and some few description. We have about me and a story of hard work and perseverance. And we have some description there also here. We have his contacts and two buttons, "Hi me" and "Download CV." When I go to the services, we have the various projects he has completed. We have 103 projects for UI and UX design and description about the project. We have 106 projects, graphic design and some description. 109 projects for web design and some description. When I go to the portfolio, we have the various projects he has completed, including web design, app design, graphic design, web apps, and we can filter between any of them. We have web design, we have app design, graphic design, and web apps. When I go to the blog, we have the various blogs he has created. We have UI and UX new designer trend 2021 and some subtitle with a button. But before that, at the top here we have our testimonials. So the testimonials, we have a picture here, and these are the various testimonials individuals have written for Alex, and we can switch between any of them. So the first is Alexander, and he's a web developer, and this is the testimonials he has written. And when we go to the next, we have Mariam, a designer, and her testimonial. We have Brad, React developer, and his testimonial. Now let's go to the blog. So these are the blogs that Alex has written, and the last is contact. So if you want to contact Alex, this is the form, your name, your email, and you describe the project, anything you want, any message you want to send to Alex, and you click the send message. And at the right, we have some few details about Alex's name, and yeah, the name is different, just Smith. That's just a dummy name. And we have address. His address is United States, and the email is youtube@gmail.com. And the best thing about this website is it is responsive also. So if you should go to the mobile view, you can see it is responsive. We can still toggle between the light mode, and when we go to the light mode and change the color to orange, let's scroll up and we have our fixed navigation. We can also open our navigation. When we change the theme, you can see it is black. Let's change it back to dark mode, and let's scroll. We have a picture of Alex and his content here. These are the projects, the services, and here we have his portfolio where we can switch between any of them using the filter tab there. And here we have the testimonials. So these are the various testimonials. We can switch between any of them using the slider. And here we have the blogs that Alex has written. And finally, we have the contacts where you can contact Alex. And the last is the footer. So guys, if you like this project and you would want to build it, I'll leave a link somewhere in the description where you can get the images so that you can code along. Also, a link to my website will be in the description where you can download the full source code. Let's get into the video. On my desktop, I have a folder with the name portfolio, and within the portfolio we have a subfolder called images. This contains all the images you're going to use on the portfolio website. I'll leave a link somewhere in the description to my website where you can download these images if you want to code along. Now let's go back and open the project with VS Code. You can use any text editor of your choice because the final code is not affected by the text editor you use. The first thing I'm going to do is to create index.html. And let's create a boilerplate using shift and exclamation sign and press enter. Let's change document to my portfolio website. Save this. And what we are going to do is to comment. We are going to write some comment to list the CDNs we are going to include in this project. So the first is box icons. The second is AOS, animate on scroll, and we have swiper, and let's also include our custom style sheet. Before the anybody tag, let's also include our comment. We are going to need AOS. We are going to need swiper, we are going to need type it. Let's include our custom script. So this is custom script. Now let's head back to our browser, and here I'm going to search for box icon. So box icons, and click on the usage. Scroll down and select import the CSS and copy this link. Head to your text editor and paste it below the comment. The next thing is to go back to our browser again, search for CDN.js, and what you must know is you must be connected to the internet in order for these CDNs to work. So what we need here is swiper. We are going to copy all these links at once and include them into the project using a trick. So let's copy the swiper bundle.min.js and the corresponding CSS to be swiper bundle.min.css. Let's also search for type 8. And let's copy the type8.min.js. Let's look for AOS, animate on scroll, and let's copy the JavaScript and the CSS. And which one again? We have type is swipe, so we have everything. Here we write link and press. We are going to press the Windows key and V, like Control V. So Windows and V. Let's look for animate on scroll, the CSS. Animate on scroll, we have the JS. Animate on scroll, we have the CSS. And let's write link, Windows V again. Let's look for swiper.css, so swiper bundle.css. And let's go to our script. Here I'm going to write script and Windows V again. Let's paste the JS and script again, Windows V. Let's paste the JS for swiper, so swiper.js. So, and now let's include type 8, so script, and let's look for type 8, which should be here, this, and our custom script. So link, this will be styles.css. Let's save this. We're going to create that file. So script should also be index.js. Now let's create our styles.css file. Styles.css. Also, let's create our index.js. Now head to styles.css and write down some reset CSS. Say reset CSS. You're going to select all and use it before and after. Let's set padding to 0, margin to 0, and box sizing to inherit. Now with the root, I'm going to paste some colors here. I'll leave a link somewhere in the description where you can copy the colors from our website and paste it here. We have some transitions also here. Now head back to your browser and search for Google Fonts. In this project, we are going to use Open Sans. So search for Open Sans. Open Sans, which is the first one. We are going to use the regular, the semi-bold, and the bold. Let's copy the CSS. Close this for now. Head back to our text editor and paste it below our colors. Now let's write a code for our HTML. Let's set box sizing to border box and scroll behavior to smooth. Let's also set the font size to 62.5%, which is 1.6 rem equals 16 pixels. Now for the body, let's set the font family to Open Sans. Also, let's use sans serif here. For the font size, I'm going to use 1.6 rem, font weight 400. Let's also set the background color to white. Then the color should be black. Also, let's set some transitions here. So transition, you're going to use the var transition. Let's choose the 2. Now scroll down, and when the body has the class of dark, let's overwrite some of the variables. The white should be 000106, which is black, and the black should be white, and the gray should be white also, and the second gray, that is gray 2, should also be white. Let's select all our LIs and set list style to none. List style to none. And for our links, let's set text decoration to none and give it color of inherit. That will inherit from the body. And let's create, okay, let's say maybe all the icons are going to include. Let's add some transitions to all of them. We are going to use the var transition too. Also, our images, let's set all the width to 100%, and the container, let's create a container class and let's give it a max width of 99.6 rem. Let's set margin top and right to 0, left and right should be auto. And let's create another class called dflex. This will be our flex container. Let's set display flex to flex, align items to center. Now head back to your HTML, and after the body tag, let's write h1 portfolio. Save this and open live server. I've already opened that, so I'm going to open it again. Go live. And we have our H1, which is portfolio. Let's close this and close this also. Let's also close this. Close this. Let's head back to our text editor and remove this. Now let's start with the header. Let's write this comment header, and below that let's create the header, which is an HTML5 tag. Let's set class to header and ID to header. Within this, let's create our navigation, and within the navigation we are going to have nav center. Also, nav center should have a display of flex. So let's add our dflex class. Let's start with the logo. Now let's start with the header and write down some comment, which is header. And we are going to start with header. Let's give it a class of header and an ID of header. Within the header, we are going to have navigation. Within the navigation, let's have nav center to center our links and the logo. And nav center should also have another class, display flex. Now let's start with the logo. So we're going to have an h2 with a class logo, another class dflex, and within the logo let's have a span with a class of color, and within this span let's have a, so we're going to have this, and another span with a text Alex. Let's save this, head back to our browser, and we have a dot and Alex. Now go back to your text editor and scroll down below the logo. Let's start with our UL with a class of navlist and another class dflex. And within this, let's have our LIs and links. So our LI with a class of nav item, and within the LI, let's have our link tags with a class nav link. Press enter. Now here let's put the pound sign. Copy this or duplicate this 4 more times. I'm using shift and alt and pressing the down arrow key simultaneously. So within the link, let's have home, and here you're going to write header. Here let's have about. Here should be about, and here also let's have services, and here should be services. Here also let's have portfolio, and here should be portfolio. Let's have blog, and here should also be blog. Let's copy this down and change this to contact, and let's also change the text to contact. Let's save this, head back to our browser, and we have our links. Now head back to your styles and let's start writing the styles for the header. So we are going to select the header class. Let's give it a mean height of 100 ph and a width of 100%. Let's set position to relative and overflow hidden. Let's select our navigation and set the padding to 1.5 top and bottom and 3 rem left and right. Let's select our nav center and let's set the max width to 114 rem. Let's set margin to 0 top and bottom, left and right should be auto. Let's give it a justify content of space between. Let's head back to our browser, and now we have the links to the right. Let's start with the logo, and let's give it a cursor of pointer. Now the logo, let's select the span, and when the span has the color, the class of color, let's give it a background color of var. Let's use our custom color. Let's also give it a color of white, and let's set padding top and bottom 1 rem, left and right should be 1.2 rem. Let's set margin right to 1.7 rem, and border radius should be 1 rem. Also transition, let's set it to var, and we want the transition too. Now let's select our nav items. And we don't want to select, or we want only the last child. Let's set margin right of 0.5 rem, and let's take a look. We have our logo and our nav links. Now head back to our HTML, and below the last li, let's write some comment, which is a theme, and this should be an li with a class nav item and another class theme dash icon. Within the theme class, let's have this a box icon bx dash moon. If you go to your browser and search for box icon, and here within the search bar search for moon, and we want this moon, so you click it and go. We have web component and we have font. Choose the font, copy this, head back to your text editor and paste it as I've written here. Now below the li, let's have another comment called close button, and here we're going to have a div with a class close, and within this div you're going to have an icon which is bx.bx-x. Now go back to your CSS, let's select the theme icon, class of icon, and font size should be 2.5 rem. Let's set cursor to pointer. Now we need to select our links, and we want the link, and when we visit it, so visited, let's set display inline block padding to 1 rem on all sides, and transition should be transition 1. And when we hover over the link, we want the color to change to color, and we want the custom color. Now let's select our theme icon and the close class, and let's set the display to none. For now, let me comment this out. Let's save this and go back to our browser, and you can see we have our nav links. Okay, they just appeared. We have the icons also. Now let's set display to none and set font size to 3 rem Let's set cursor to pointer. Now, okay, we will also have our hamburger. So let's set that class here before we create it. So when navigation has a class of fix dash nav, we want to set some couple of styles. Position should be fixed and top should be 0. Let's set left to 0 and width should be 100%. Let's set box shadow to 0, 5 pixels, 15 pixels, and RGBA of 0, 0, 0.2. Let's give it a Z index of 99999 and a background color of custom color. And transition should be var transition 2. Now let's select the logo. So when navigation has a class fix nav, we want the logo and the span in it. The one with the color should have a background color of white. And let's set the color to black, which is 00. And when navigation has a class of fix nav, let's set nav link. When we hover, it should have color of white. Now we have this. Let's head back to our text editor and start writing some media queries. Media, let's set max width to 768 pixels. Let's start with the header. Let's set the mean height to 80 VH, and the nav list should have flex direction of column. Let's set align items to flex start, and position should be fixed. Also, let's set the top to 0 and the left should also be 0. Let's set the height to 100%, max width to 35 rem. Let's set padding top to 3 rem and background color should be var black. Let's set transition to var transition. Let's set a 2. Now Z index should be 999. Let's save this, head back to our browser, and let's go for the responsive mode. Let's set the width to 100%. Head back. Now we have it correctly placed. And when nav item has a class of open, let's set left to 0 and width to 100%. And let's start with the logo. Let's set the font size to 2 rem and nav item should be margin 0.5 rem. That is top and bottom. This is top and bottom. Then left and right should be 0. So bottom should be 1.5 rem. Now when the nav item has a class of theme icon, let's set display to none. Also, let's start with our nav links. Let's set padding to 1 rem. That's top and bottom, then left and right should be 0. Let's set color to white and font size should be 1.8 rem. Now let's write hamburger. We also want the theme. We also want the close. Let's set it to display block. And for our close button, let's set position to absolute. Top should be 2%. Let's set right to 5%. And let's give it a color of white. Color of white. Let's head back to our browser and we have our nav links. Let me inspect this. It is still 1 rem. It is still 1 rem. Okay, that's 1.5 here. So now let's set the left to negative 100% and the width should be 0. Thus, we want it to show only when it has a class of open. Now go back to your index.html and after the theme, after the URL, let's have a comment of theme, and let's start with a div with a class theme and another class theme icon. Let's copy the moon icon and paste it here. And let's start with the hamburger. A div with a class hamburger. And we need this. We have our icon which is bx and we have bx dash menu. Let's head back to our browser and the icon is showing, but it's not showing properly. So we have hamburger, the spelling is wrong. So now it should appear where we have this one, which is, let's check the font size. No, we want the hamburger. Font size is 3 rem, so it is correct. Let's go back to our text editor and now head to your index.js and let's write a comment of toggle navigation. So first, I'm going to select our hamburger. Document.query selector. We want the hamburger. Let's also select our close button. Document.query selector. Close. Let's also select our nav list. So we have document.query selector should be nav list. Now we are going to add an event listener to the hamburger. Add event listener. We want a click event and let's call our callback function. And when we click on the hamburger, we want to add a class of open to the nav list. We have open. Let's copy this down and change the hamburger to close. Also, we want to change the add to remove. Now head back to your browser and let's click this it has been added. We have open, but nothing happened. So if nav list, not nav item, nav list has a class of open, then we want the left should be 0 and the width should be 100%. Let's go back, and now we have it. Let's click this and to go back, open and close. Now we've successfully created the navigation. The next thing is to create our hero area. So head back to our text editor and let's go to our index.html. Now before our closing header tag, let's have a comment of overlay, and underneath let's have a class, a div with a class of overlay. It should be an empty div. So let's save this. Underneath this, let's have another comment, and we have hero image. And underneath this comment, let's have an img tag. Let's select our hero image. So hero image dot, let's close this. Now let's give it a class of hero image, hero dash img. Underneath the hero image, let's have our social links. We're going to start with a div with a class of socials, and within this let's have a span with a class of icon, and within the icon class let's have our various icons, which is bx.bxl dash Instagram. Let's copy this down 2 more times and change Instagram to Facebook, this also to GitHub. Let's save this, go back to our browser, and we should have our links, our icons. Since Facebook, the Facebook one is, so Facebook, we should have the 3 icons here. Now underneath the social links, let's have our color control. We start with a div with a class of control, and within this div let's have a div with a class of widgets and also display flex. And within the widget let's have an icon with a class of, so I with a class of bxs-conc. And after the widget class, let's have another class called colors, and here we're going to have all our possible colors. Expand, let's give it a data set dash id should be equal to, so let's copy this down 4 more times and change this to hash ff6174. This should be hash 42caff. This should also be 7462E1, and we have ff4600, and lastly we have CE00FF. Now let's save this, head back to our browser. Let's close this for now. We have our social link and our widget icon. So let's go to our CSS and start styling. We select our overlay. Let's give it a position of absolute, a width of 100 rem, a height of 100 rem. Let's also give it a border radius of 50%. Right should be -20%, and bottom should be negative 70%. Let's give it a background color of var custom color. Transition should be our transition 2, and lastly, let's give it a z index of -1. Let's head back to the browser, and it is at the bottom here. Why is it so? Let me see. We have the header. Yes, it is correct. The image is the one causing the problem. So let's target the image, the hero-img. Let's set position to absolute, right to -10%, and bottom to -35%, z index to -1. Let's save this, go back, and we have it well placed. Now let's write some media query for the overlay and the media. Let's have a max width of 996 pixels, and here let's target the overlay. Let's give it a width of 70 rem, a height of 70 rem. Right should be -20%, bottom will be -40%, and the image hero-image should have a right of -20%, bottom should be -20% also. Let's copy this down, and let's change the pixels to 768 and remove the overlay. The hero image should have a right of -20, the bottom should be 5. Let's copy this down, and this should be 567. Let's select our header. Let's give it a mean height of 100 VH, and select the overlay. Let's set the width to 55 rem, then the height should be 55 rem, and the right should be 0, bottom should be -40%. For the hero image, let's set the bottom to 0, and the right should be -30%. Also, let's set width to 60 rem. Let's go and take a look. So go to your browser and change this to the responsive mode. Okay, it is responding correctly. Now let's close this, head back to our style.css, and let's go back to our HTML. So we have social links. Let's copy this class, go back to style.css. Let's write a comment here called social links, and let's paste the class here. We're going to set the position to absolute, bottom should be 5%, left should be 10%, and the span, so social, you want the span should have a font size of 3 rem, and a color of gray. Color of var gray 2. Let's set cursor to pointer also. And when we hover over the span, you want the icon should have a color of custom color, and let's give it a transition of tran 1. Now let's write a media query to hide, so max width to hide the icons. Let's say social should have a display of none at a width of 76, so 768 pixels. Now let's go back to our browser, and we have the social links at the bottom here. When we hover over them, we have this nice animation. Now let's write some styles for the color control. So let's select the control class and give it position of fixed, and the right should be -4 rem, and the top should be 15%. Let's say transition to var transition 1, and the set index should be 1000. Now when control has the class of open, we want to set the right to 0. So for now, let's change this to 0. Let's copy this down and change this to -4 and comment it out so that we will not forget. Now let's select the widget in the control widget and set position to absolute. Position to absolute, and let's set the left to -3.7 rem. Also border radius should be 1 rem. That's left top, then right should be 0, bottom should be 0, and left should be 1 rem also. Let's set padding to 0.5 rem, then 0 left and right, then bottom should also be 0.7 rem. Let's give it some box shadow 0, 2 pixels, 5 pixels, RGBA 0,0,0.2, and let's set cursor to pointer. Also background color should be white. Let's take a look. Okay, let's set the control, and we want the widget and the icon in the widget will have a font size of 2.3 rem. Animation should be spin. We want 2 seconds linear, and it should be infinite. Let's set the color of the icon to be 121713. Let's go back to the browser, and it's already spinning. I don't know why it is spinning, because I haven't added the keyframes yet. Keyframe spin. At 0%, we want the transform should be rotate 0 degrees, and at 100%, we want transform to rotate at 360 degrees. Okay, there is no this thing here. And for the border, we have one rem. It should be border radius rather, not border radius. Now it should work. Okay, now let's go for our colors. We are going to use control. We want the colors in control. Should have a display of block and a width of 1.9 rem and height should be 1.9 also. Padding should be 1.7 0.7 rem. Border radius should be 50%. Let's set box shadow to this box shadow. So we're going to copy this, go back and paste it here. Let's give it a cursor of pointer. Now we are going to select the colors and we want the span, not the last child. Let's give it a margin bottom of 0.7 rem. Then paste this again. We want the span and the nth child, we want 1. Let's give it a background color of pink color. We're going to copy this and paste it down 4 more times. Change this to 2 and the color should be blue color 3, blue color 3. The third one should be blue color 1. The fourth one should be orange and the last one should be purple. So let's change this to 5. Let's take a look and nothing is happening. The colors, the span, since they are not having width, the colors and the span. At the top here, let's write control and colors. This should have a background color of white and padding should be 1 rem, top and bottom. Left and right should be 0.8 and box shadow, let's copy this and paste it. Now everything should work. Now we have our colors. The next thing is to head to our JavaScript and we are going to work on the theming. So let's write a comment, theme, and let's select our icons. Go to document.query selector or all the classes with the name theme icon. Let's save this and let's console log icons. In the console we have 2 node lists. In order to convert them to array, we are going to put this in a square bracket and before it I'm going to spread them. So now we have 2 arrays, not node lists. So 2 arrays. Now let's look through them first. Icons.forEach, we want icon. Let's have our so if icon We want to add an event listener to it. I click event. Our callback function should be document. When we click on the icon, we want to add a class of, so let's toggle that class. Let's toggle the class of dark. Whenever we click on the icons, we want to toggle the class of dark on the body. Let's go back to our browser and click the theme icon. You can see we are toggling the class of dark. Let's head back to our JavaScript, and underneath the toggling of the class dark, let's have an if statement. So let's copy this and paste it in the if statement and change the toggle to contains. So if the body contains the class of dark, we want to change the icon in the span to, let's say I should be, let's give it a class of bx-sun, and style, let's change the color to white. Let's copy this, and else let's paste it here. We're going to change this to moon, and this should be #121713. Let's go back to our browser. When we click on the theme, the icon should change to the sun. When we click on it, it should change to the moon. Now we are going to add a functionality to the colors. So we are going to write our comment colors, and underneath that, let's select our widget, which is document.querySelector. On the widget, let's also select the control, document.querySelector. We want control. Let's add an event listener to the widget. We're going to have a click event, our callback function, and we're going to toggle the class open on the control, class list.toggle open. Now head back to your CSS and comment this and remove this. Let's go back to our browser. When we click this, we should toggle the class of open, so this should open. When we click again, it should close. Let's go back to our JavaScript, and let's select all our colors. We're going to do the same spreading here, document.querySelector all. We want to select colors and the spans in the colors. Now we're going to select our root element, query selector. We want the root. Let's change the style, and we want to set the property t to the first variable is a custom color, that's a variable, and the second is a value. We want to set the color to 42 CAFF. Now let's look through our colors for each. I want color. Let's add an event listener to color. When we click, Let's call this callback function. Const current color should be equal to color dot dataset dot id dataset.id. In our HTML, we give each of the span data-id. So we are selecting that and we are taking the value of the id. When we console log this current color, we should see some results. Now when we open this and click, we should see the value of that corresponding span. This. Now let's close this. Go back to our JavaScript and copy the document, the root selection, and change the value to current color. Now head back to your browser, toggle this out, and let's change the colors, and you can see the colors have been changed. Click this to close. Now let's add an event listener to the window object. So window.add event listener. We want a scroll event. Whenever we scroll, we want to close the color, the control color. So control dot class dot remove the class of open. Whenever we scroll, we want to remove that class of open. So we want to close the control. Whenever we scroll, we can't scroll right now because we don't have any content at the bottom. Now we are done with the control. Let's go back to our HTML. Underneath the control colors, let's have our hero comment, and let's start with a div with a class of content. And within this div, let's have a span with a text hello, and an h1 with a text Alex. I'm Alex. Then let's have a span with an ID of type 1, and a paragraph underneath the h1, lorem of 20 characters. Below the paragraph, let's have a button with a class of btn and btn-0, and within this, let's have a text of hire me. Let's put a pound sign here. Go back to our browser and we should see our span, our h1n. So let's write the effect for the typing. Go back to our JavaScript, and below that, let's write a comment, type it, and we are going to do new type it. It should be capital, type it, and we're going to select our ID, which is type 1, comma, curly braces, speed should be 120. Let's set loop to true and wait until visible to true. Now after the closing, come down and write type. We want designer, comma, curly braces, delay. Let's set a delay of 400. Underneath that, let's pause after typing. Let's set it to 500. You pause for 500 milliseconds, and let's type again. Now we're going to type a different thing, which is developer. Underneath that, let's pause again. for 500 milliseconds and delete. We're going to delete 9 characters. Here we didn't delete, so we need to delete before we type again. Delete 9 characters. Underneath that, let's go. Now if we go to our browser, you should see the typing effects. Now let's head back to our styles.css and scroll down. Have our comment hero. Select header. I want the comment content. It is content. I don't know. Content. And let's set the position to absolute. Top should be 35% and left should be 8%. And let's select the span from the content. We want color should be gray and transition should be our transition 2. Let's copy this down 3 more times and change the span to H1. Let's remove this, change this to font size of 5 rem. Underneath that, let's have font weight of 700. Now the span in the H1 should also have the same font size of 5 rem and the font weight of 700. Span in the H1 should have a different color, a color of our custom color, and it shouldn't have font size, rather it should have a margin top of 1 rem. Well, why shouldn't be margin top? Because the span in the H1 let's give it just a transition. So let's copy this down. Let's copy this and paste it there. And let's focus on our paragraph. Let's give it a color of gray, which is correct. And transition should be this transition 2, and the width should be 60%. Let's set margin top to 1 rem. Let's head to our browser and everything looks great. Now let's focus on our button. So btn, let's display a line block. Padding top and bottom should be 1.2 rem, 4 rem left and right, and border radius should be 1 rem all sides. Background color should be custom color and color should be white. Let's set border to 2 pixels, solid, and it should be transparent for now. Transition, let's copy this, paste it here and change it to 1. And when btn has a class of outline, we want it to have a margin left of 1 rem. We're going to use this class in the about section, and color should be var black. And let's set background color of transparent, and the border, let's copy this, paste it here, change the transparent to our custom color. Now when we hover over the button btn hover, we want to change the background color to transparent, and the border, let's copy this, should be our custom color, and our color should be black. And when we hover over the outline, hover, we want the background color should be our custom color, and the color should be white. And the hero dash btn, that's a class we added to the btn hero so btn hero, not hero btn dash hero. Let's give it a margin top of 3 rem. Let's head back to our browser and you should see everything working well. Let's change the colors and everything is working. Now let's write some media queries. Media max width of 768 pixels, and let's target our content. So hero, header, content, we want the top to be 25% and the left to be 5%. We also want the header content. So let's say header, let's check the header content, and we want the span. Let's give it a font size of 1.5 rem, and let's copy this down 2 more times and change the span to h1. We want the font size to be 4 rem, and the span in the h1 should have the same font size of 4 rem. Now for our button, let's copy this down using Shift Alt and the down arrow key. This is our btn. It should have a padding of 0.8 rem, 3 rem. Let's go back to our browser and change this to responsive mode. Okay, it is taking effect. Let's copy the whole media query down and change the value to 567 for smaller devices. And for the content, we want the top to be 15%. Let's move the left. The span, we want it to be 1.5, so let's move this. For the h1, we want it to be 3 rem. And for the paragraph, we need a paragraph here. The paragraph, we want 1.5, and the width should be 90%. The width should be 90%. Now the span in the h1 should have the same font size, which is 3 rem. And now we need the button. So .btn, it should have a padding of 0.8 rem. I think it's the same. Let's leave the button that way, and let's target the hero button rather. So btn dash hero, and let's give it a margin top of 2 rem. So now let's go back and to now we can see everything's looking great. Let's use the Moto G4. Let's head back to our index.html. Now, after the header, let's write a comment about section. Below that, let's start with the section tag with a class of section and another class of about and an ID of about. Let's save this. Within this, let's start with our container class, and within the container, let's have a div of about center, and it should be display flex. Within the about center, let's have our column. So col1, let's copy this down, and within the first column, let's have our svg. So go to the images folder and look for about.svg. Copy this whole thing. Let's close this. Go back to our html. Let me close this and paste it here. Let's save this, and within the svg, let's write our image tag, and let's put this image there, the about dash img.png. Let's go back to our browser, and when we scroll down, we can see we have our images and the svg. Now let's head back to our css, and let's give a comment before about. Let's start with the section. We want padding. Top should be 10 rem, left and right should be 3 rem, and bottom should be 5 rem, and overflow should be hidden. Let's select, let me see. Okay, let's write the content for the second column, and in that we're going to have a class, a div with a class of title. Expand with, let's just have the span first, and lorem of, let's say 5, and below the span, let's have an h1 of about me. Underneath the title, let's have an h3 with a text, a story of hard work and perseverance. Below the h3, let's have a paragraph with lorem of, let's say 50. Let's save this. Alt Z2. I think it's too much. Let's delete some. Below the paragraph, let's have an h3 with a text contact, and below the contact, let's have another paragraph, lorem of, let's say 20. 20 is okay. And underneath the paragraph, let's have a div with a class buttons. Within this, let's have two buttons, the first being btn, and the text should be hi me. Let's put a pound sign there. Let's copy this down and change the, let's add a secondary class of outline, the class we created before. Let's go back to our browser, and we should have the second column. Now let's go to our css, and let's select our title class. So title, let's give it a margin bottom of 5 rem, and text align should be center. Let's select the span in the title and give it a font size of 1.4 rem, and the h1, so title h1 should have a font size of 4 rem. Let's also give it a color of our custom color, and the transition should be our custom transition, which is a transition 2. Let's start with the column. Let's give them position relative and flex of 50%, and height should be 50 rem, and the column with the SVG should have position of absolute, and width should be 85%, 85 rem rather, and bottom, let's set bottom to -4%, left should be -40%, and let's give it a fill color of our custom color, and transition, let's copy this and paste it here. Let's go to our browser, and we've correctly positioned it. Now let's target our, so we need to change the classes. This should be core 2 and the first one should be core 1. Let's select core 2, and we want to give it a flex of 50%. But before that, we need to position our image wall. Let's copy this and paste it here. You're going to set the bottom to -4, the left also -40. There will be no fill, and the width should be 85 from the same width. Let's head back to our browser, and it's correct. We also need to write the code for the fixed nav. Let's go back. Let's finish writing the styles for the column 2, then we focus on that. So core-2, we want the title, and the title, we want the text align to be left, and margin bottom should be 2 rem. Now core 2, let's select the paragraph and give it a color of gray 2. Also, let's give it a font size of 1.5 rem and a margin bottom of 1.5 rem. Now the buttons. So core 2, we want the buttons, margin top should be 3 rem. Let's go back to our browser, and we have our buttons also. Let's write the media query for the max width, which will be 768 pixels. Let's select the about, and we want the about center -center. Flex direction should be column. And the core one, we want the SVG should have position of relative, and bottom should be -4%, and left should be -3%. Let's copy this down and change the SVG to IMG. Bottom should be 1% and the left should be 3%. Let's go back and change this to responsive mode. Okay, it's not taking effect. We need to change the image to position absolute. Now let's head back to our browser and refresh. -3% and should be placed properly. Let's close this. Okay, let's make it 1%, and we're going to write another media query for smaller devices, which is 567. So for 567, we want the btn dash outline to have a margin of 1 rem 000, and for the SVG we still want this. Now for our image we want -3%. Let's remove this and the left property. Now let's check on other devices. It's okay. Now let's focus. I think we are done, so let's go to our JavaScript and write a code for the fixed nav. Go to our index.js and underneath the type it, you're going to have fixed nav. Let's select our nav bar, which should be equal to document.query selector. We want our navigation, and let's get the nav height also, which should be equal to nav bar dot get bounding client rec. We call it, and we want the height. Let's get the window and add an event listener of scroll. Our callback function, sorry, the mistake here. Oops. Callback function should be if, but first we need to get the scroll height. So let's say const scroll height should be equal to window dot page y offset, and if scroll height is greater than the nav height, we want to add a class. So navbar.classList.add fix dash nav. Else, let's copy this and paste it here. We want to remove that class. Let's go back to our browser, and when we scroll past the height of the navigation, we should see our fixed nav. Now everything is working. Let's head back to our index.html and write a code for our services. Let's start with a section tag with a class of section, and another class of services, and an ID of services. Within this, let's have our title and the span lorem of 5. Let's save this. Underneath the span, we're going to have our h1 with the test services. Now underneath the title, let's have a class of row and another class of container. Within this, let's have our core, which is our first column, and it should have, within this, let's have another div with a class of icon. Within this, let's have our icon, which is bx dash ball. Let's save this, and underneath the icon, let's have a span with a text 103. That's the number of projects we've completed, and underneath that, let's have an h3 with a text UI and UX designer or design. Underneath that, let's have a paragraph, a lorem of, let's say, 20. And what you're going to do is to copy the column and paste it 2 more times and change the text. So this will be 106 projects, and here we should have graphic design, and the icon also should be different. This should be layer. And the last column, let's have the icon to be desktop, and the text here should be web design, and the project should be maybe 109. Now let's save this, go back to our browser, scroll down, and we have our services content. Let's go to our styles.css, and the first thing we have to do is to comment. So we write services. We start with a section, so we want a row from the section. Let's give a display of grid, and grid template columns should be repeat. We want auto fit, comma. The minimum should be 25 rem, and we want the maximum should be 1 fr. And let's set the gap to 5 rem. Let's go to our browser, and we have 3 columns. Now let's target our column. So we want the row and we want the column. Let's set padding. Top and bottom should be 1.5, and left and right should be 1 rem. Let's set border radius to 1 rem on all sides, and box shadow to 0.5 pixels, 15 pixels, RGBA 0.2. So we want black, but the opacity should be 0.2. Transition should be our custom transition, and let's set border to 3 pixels, solid, transparent, and cursor should be pointer. Now when the body has the class of dark, we want our services and the row, then the column to have a border color of our custom color. Also, let's select our services. In the row, we want column, then the icon. Let's give it a font size of 6 rem, color of custom. Now we need to target our span. So you see services row, and we want the span. Let's give them font size of 1.3 rem. Color should be gray, so gray 2, and let's copy this down. Let's change this to h3 and remove this. Let's set margin to 0.4 rem, 0 left and right, then 1 rem bottom. Now let's copy this also and paste it here. Change the span to paragraph. The font size should be 1.5. The color should be gray 2. Let's add margin bottom to be 1 rem. Now when we hover over the column, so hover, we want to have a background color of custom, and when the body has a class of dark and we hover over the column, we want to change the color of the icon to white. Now the paragraph, so let's start with the icon. Let's give it some transition. That's when we hover, we want to give so transition 2. Let's copy this down and change. Let's bring comma here and copy this down 3 more times. Change this to paragraph, change this to h3, and change this to a span. And what we want is transition 2, but the color should be white. And the icon, let's give it a transition. The first one should have a transition, so let's bring it to the bottom here. Now let's go back to our browser, and we should have this. When we change, we should have this also. Now let's head back to our index.html and start writing the code for the portfolio. Since we didn't comment this, so we say services. Let's change it to portfolio. Now let's start with our section tag with a class of section, and another class of portfolio with an ID of portfolio. Now within the portfolio section, let's have a row with a secondary class of container. Now let's have our title, a span lorem of 5, and an h1 with a text portfolio. Now underneath the title, let's have our filter buttons. So filter btns and the secondary class of display flex. And within this, let's have span with a class of active. And let's give it a data dash id of, this one should be all. And within the span, let's have a test of all. Let's copy this down 5 times and change. Let's remove the active class from all. The data id of the second one should be web design, and the test should be web design. The third should have a data id of app design, and the test should also be app design. The fourth one, let's have graphic design, and the test should be graphic design. And this is the last one. Let's have web apps, and the test should be web apps. So let's delete the last span. Now, after the row, the div with the class row, let's have another div with a class of projects and with a secondary class of container. Within this, let's have our image tag, and this, you're going to have the first image is going to be blog.jpg. Let's also add our data id and copy. Let's also add a class of item. Let's copy this down, change this to all, not all. The first one should be, let's say, graphic design. The second one, let's say, web design. The third, let's say, graphic design again. The fourth, let's say, web design. The fifth, let's say app, so web apps. And the last one, let's leave the last one for now. Let's change the content here. So the first one is blog, the second is web 3, and the third image is blog again. The fourth should be web 1. The fifth should be app 1. And I think that's it. App 1 slash app 1. Let's make this app 3 or app 2. App 3. Let's check the images for app 2. So app3.jpg app 2. Okay, let's copy this down again, and here let's make it app 3, and here should be app 1. Let's save this, go back to our browser, and we should see these images. Now we need to write the CSS for the portfolio. So let's comment this portfolio, and we are going to start with portfolio, the row. Let's give them grid template columns of 1 fr 1.6 fr. We need to set them to display grid. That's for the title and the filter. That's it. And let's select the title and give it a text align of left. Now let's select our filter buttons. So portfolio filter dash btns. Let's give it position of relative, padding of 1 rem. Let's select our buttons and we want the after. Let's set the content property to an empty string and position should be absolute. Top should be 0, left should be 0, width should be 100%, height should be 100%, background color should be our custom color. Let's set opacity to 0.2 rem, 0.2, just 0.2, then z index of -1. Now let's paste it again. We want the span. Let's give margin right of 0.5 rem. Padding should be 1 rem. Cursor should be pointer, and transition we want var transition 1. Let's give it a border bottom of 2 pixels, solid, transparent. When we hover over the span, let's have the color should be custom, and when we hover over, or when the portfolio, let's paste this, when it is having the class of active, let's give it a border color of var custom, and let's also change the color to custom. Now for the portfolio project, display grid, let's set the grid template columns to repeat 3 times and 1 fr, and the gap should be 3 rem. Now when portfolio and the project, let's select the item. When it has a class of height, I want to set the display to none, and when it has a class of active, let's set the display to block. Let's give the portfolio some margin top. So portfolio, so let's give it margin top of, let's say, 3 rem. Let's head back and we have this nice margin. Now for the media query, so we start with media max width of 996 pixels. I want to select the portfolio and the row. We want the row. Let's set grid template columns to 1FR and the text align should be center. Let's select the title. We want title. Let's set margin bottom to 0 and text align should be center. Let's select our filter buttons, portfolio, filter buttons. Let's set display to inline block and padding should be 1.5 rem and 0 left and right. Margin bottom should be 2 rem. And for the project, portfolio, then project. Let's set display or grid template columns to repeat to 1FR. Grid template columns. Let's write the media query for smaller devices, max width of 567. At this time around, let's make it 5597 pixels. And we want the portfolio. We want the filter BTNs and let's select the span from it. We want the font size to be 1.5 rem and the display should be inherit. Let's select the portfolio project also. Project. Let's give it grid template columns of 1FR. Let's inspect this, the title. Seems I'm missing something out. The title. We want the title. So the filter buttons. Okay. It seems the padding there is causing some issues. Let's change the padding to the, let's see, the filter BTNs. This should be 0.5 rem. I think this works well. We also, I don't know why it is. Okay. I think we need to change the align items to start. To align items to start. So let's start. And let's take a look again. And it's still the same. Okay, so it was a device that was causing the issue. Now let's go and write a functionality for the filtering. So we come down here and we comment this out as filter project. Let's select our filter BTN. So document dot query selector we want our filter dash btns. Let's select our spans also. Document dot query selector, or we want filter btns. I want the span. Let's copy this down and change this to items, and also change this to portfolio. So this project.item. Now let's add event listener to our filter btn. Filter btn dot, I don't know if I'm writing this, filter btn, add event listener. We want a click event, and our callback function, let's pass in the event, and filter should be equal to e.target.closest span. We want the closest span. So if not filter, then we simply want to return. First, let's get the ID from the filter. We see filter dot dataset dot id, and let's console log id and see. So in the console, when we click outside, we have filter is not defined. Okay, wrong spelling. Filter. Okay, that's the spelling. Let's click outside. Let's click this. Let's make it larger. So when we click this, we get there. But when we click outside, nothing happens. When we click on this, we get our app, we get our web, and we get all. What we are going to do next is to add, let's look through our spans. So spans dot for each. For each, we want the single span. So let's give some class list. So class list dot remove. So we are going to remove the class of active. Then we are going to add the class of active to our filter. Now let's select our items and look through them. Say item. Yeah, I'm going to add class of height to the item, and also, so let's remove, it's not add. Let's remove the class of height and add the class of active. So this should be, and let's get the target ID from item dot data set dot item. Did we call it item or ID? Dot ID, we call it ID. So dot ID. So if target ID is equal to id. That's the id at the top here. We want to add this class, but first we need to remove the class of hide again and add the class of active. Class of active. Else if id is equal to or, then let's copy this again and paste it here. And this you are only going to remove the class of hide. Let's go back to our browser. Click this. Nothing happens. And no error also in the console. So let's check our code well. First of all, the data set item. Okay, there is some mistake here. Yeah, let's do, so let's say web design, and here also let's do graphic design, but here should be app rather. So do we have app design? Yeah, we have app design. So app design, and let's change this one also to app design. So we are selecting all our items and getting the IDs. So let's try it again. We are switching between the classes, but nothing is happening. If you go to our project, let's click. Okay, the classes are not being removed and added. Sorry. So first, let's double check our, so project, we want the item. So project, let's console log items and see. And we have our items. So first, we are looping through the btns. So btn, first we add an event listener to our filter btns. I click event, and we want the closest span, the closest span e.target. So let's console log filter and remove this. Filter is this, filter is this, filter is this. Okay, we are getting it. So if not filter, we return. Now we are getting the ID from, so we are adding it and getting the class of active. Now for our items, for each we want this, and item dot class list dot add. We want to add hide and remove. So this is where the fault is, and remove active. Then we get the ID, and if the target ID is equal to the ID, we want to remove and add active. Okay, now it should work. If you click, it should work. Now we are adding and removing the active class. Now let's remove the inline block from this. And for the span, we have to write some media query. So when we have this, let's change the, so let's see something. Let's change the margin right to 0. Copy this and paste it here. So this should be 0, and the padding the padding should be just, let's give it top and right should be 0.5, and the left and right should be that. So let's go back and see. Now we have this. When we go to the responsive mode, we have this also. Okay, now the next thing to do is to start building the testimonial section. So we head back to our text editor. Now let's start with our testimonials. So we have our section with a class of section and a secondary class of testimonials. Within this, let's have our container class and the secondary class of test center. And within the test center, let's have a div with a class of left. Within this div, let's have our image. Go into our images folder and we want test image. Underneath the left div, let's have our right div, and it should have some couple of classes: right dash swiper and swiper container. Within this right swiper, let's have our title. Start with a span lorem of 5, and below the span let's have an h1 with a testimonials. Let's save this, go back to our browser, and we should have our image and our testimonials. Go below the title class and let's start with a class of swiper dash wrapper. And within this, let's have a swiper dash slide. We start with our paragraph with lorem of 40. Let's save this, and underneath the paragraph let's have our h4, test of Alexander, and we write a span with a test web developer. Let's copy the swiper slide 2 more times and change the text to Mariam, and she is a designer, and change the last one to Brad, and he is a React developer. Let's save this, go back to our browser, and we have the test. Now what you're going to do is within the swiper container, so you look for the swiper container. Within this, underneath the wrapper, let's start with our paginations and the previous and next buttons. So write a div with a class of swiper dash button dash previous, and within this let's have our icon of bx dash left dash arrow dash alt. Let's save this. Let's also give it a secondary class of swiper icon. Let's copy this down and change the previous to next and the left also to right. Underneath the swiper button next, let's have a div with a class swiper pagination. Let's go to our browser and we have it, but it's not showing. So let's go to our JavaScript and initialize it. So let's write our comment swiper and we select the container. We say const swiper should be equal to new swiper. Let's select our the right swiper. So this, the right swiper, and it's a class. After you bring a curly braces, CSS mode should be true, loop should be true, slides per view should be 1, pagination should be EL. Let's go and copy the swiper pagination, which is this one, and it should be a class. Let's set clickable to true. Underneath pagination, let's start with our navigation. We have our next EL to be, let's copy this to be this class, and let's change this to next and copy this down, change both of these to brief. Let's head back to our browser and we can see the swiper is going on, but we can't hold and drag. So let's go to our CSS and write down some code. We start with the comment testimonials. So let's select our test center. Let's give it a display grid template columns of 0.8 rem, 0.8 fr, 1.3 fr. Let's give it a gap of 5 rem. Let's select our section, and when it has the class of testimonial, we want the title to have a text align of left. Let's select our swiper container to test testimonials, and we want our swiper dash container. Let's give it a max width of 50 rem. Let's select the left div and set text align to center. Also the right div to position relative. Now let's select our paragraph in the right div and give it margin bottom of 1 rem, font size of 1.5 rem, color of var gray. Let's copy this down and change the right to H1, select the direct span, and the font size should be 1.5 and the color should be gray too. Now let's copy this and paste it below and change the paragraph to h4, and it should have a margin bottom of 0.5 and a font size. We don't need font size. Color also, we don't need color. Let's have font weight of 600. Let's go to our browser and we have this. Now our buttons are not being shown, so let's go to our CSS and let's start with a swiper button. We need a next and it after. Copy this down. We need a previous and it after also. Let's set content to nothing and swiper icon should have font size of 5 rem and color of our custom color. Let's set the swiper button as next and the previous top should be 20%. Now let's select the previous again and let's set the left to 80%. Let's go to our browser and nothing is being shown, so let's inspect this. Let's look for our swiper container, the right. Within it we have our title and here we have our since we are not doing something right, this should be in the container and this is the wrapper, so this should be in the container. Let's go back and now we have our next and previous button and our pagination. Now let's write down some media queries. So we go to our styles.css. We start with media. We want max width to be 996 pixels. Let's select text center and give it grid template columns of 1 fr. So you want only one color. Let's copy this down and change the value to 768, and we want to select our testimonials left and you want the image. Let's give it a width of 70%. Let's copy this down again, change the value to 567. This time around we want the right, we want our paragraph, and let's set the width to 100%. Now let's select our testimonials. We need a swiper container. Let's give it a max width of 33 rem. Our previous and Next buttons should have a top of 30% and the previous should have a left of 55%. Also, the next should have a right of 60 pixels. Let's go back to our browser and go into responsive mode, and we have it like this. So let's toggle this and everything works. The next thing is the block section. So you go to our HTML. Let's start with a comment of block. Let's start with our normal section with a class of section and a secondary class of block with an ID of block. Let's save this. Within the section, let's have our title. We start with our span, lorem of 5. Prettier is not working. Come in. Let me close it again. Now let me save this. And it's still not working. Okay. My computer is freezing. Let's start with our H1. And here you're going to write blog. Underneath the title, let's start with a row class. And it should have a secondary class of container. Within this, let's have call. And within the call, let's have image. Within our image, let's select blog 1. And below the image, let's have H3 with a test UI. And so let's say UI and UX, new designer trend 2021. Underneath the H3, let's have a paragraph, lorem of, let's say, 5. And below the paragraph, let's have a link with a text, read more. Let's copy the call 2 times and change the text of the H3 to best drone for your next video, and change the image to 2 and this one also to 3. And let's change the text of the last one, the H3, to best hosting providers 2021. Let's save this. Go back to our browser. Let's scroll down and we have our block section. It needs more styling, so we go to our CSS and let's leave a comment. Blog. We start with a blog. Let's select the core and the image in the core. Let's give it a border radius of 1 rem. Let's start with the blog again, core H3. Let's give it a font size of 2 rem, a height of 5 rem, and a margin of 0.5 rem and 0. Let's start with blog again. our core, and we need paragraph. Let's get font size of 1.5 rem. Let's select our link, give it display inline block, font size of 1.5 rem, background color of var custom color. Let's set the color to white and padding to 0.7 rem, 1.5 rem. Border radius should be 0.5 rem. And let's set margin top to 1 rem and transition to var transition 2. Let's save this, head back to our browser, and we have this. So let's check the view in a mobile, and it looks great. The next thing is to start with our contact section. So head back to your code editor, to our index.html. We leave a comment of contact. Now we start with a div. It should be a section with a class of contact, or let's use a div rather, because we're using the SVG. So contact dash upper, and it should have an ID of contact. Within this div, let's go to this website, getwaves.io. It seems my bundle is finished. Google font. No. Get waves. Wave. Get waves rather. Getwaves.io. And we are going to generate our SVG from this site. So what you have to do is to click on this, and it will auto generate different SVGs. What you like is what you copy. So let's choose this one. We click on this button and let's copy the code. Let's go back to our code editor and paste it here. What you're going to do is to remove the fill. Also, let's change some things here. Let's reduce the last view box to, let's make it 19, and the fill opacity is 1. Okay, everything is okay. Let's save this, head back to our browser. Let's close this, also close this, and we have the SVG here. And what we are going to do is, underneath the contact, let's start with our section with a class of section and a secondary class of contact. Let's have our title, our span lorem of 5, each one of contact me. Underneath the title, let's start with our contact center. Let's give it a secondary class of container, and we want our left div also. And in here, we're going to write the form. So we need form with a class of form. We don't need the action. Within the form, let's have our h2 with a text message me. Underneath the h2, let's have a div. Within this div, let's have two inputs. First being test with a placeholder of name, and it should be required. Underneath that, let's copy this down, and this should be email, and the placeholder should be email. Now underneath the div, let's have our test area. Let's move. The name should be message. The ID, don't need the ID. The column we need 10, and the row should also be 10. Placeholder, let's say describe project, and below the test area, let's have another input. Let's remove that for now. Let's have a button with a type of submit. Let's also give it a class of btn and btn-form, and the text should be send message. For the right side, so it is the left side, and for the right side, let's start with a div with a span of icon, and within this div, let's have our icons bx dash user. That's the first one, and underneath the icon, let's have a span with a class of content. Within this, let's have our h3 name and a span with a text John Smith. Let's copy this down 2 times and change the icon to map, and the name should be address, and the span should have a text of United States. The last one, envelope, and the h3 should be email. This should be youtube@gmail.com. Let's save this, head back to our browser, and we should have this. Now let's go back to our CSS, and we're gonna start with a comment. So we say contact. So let's select our contact upper class. Let's give it matching button of -2%, and let's select the same class again, contact upper. We want the SVG this time. Give it a fill of var custom color. Transition, let's copy this. Transition should be this. Now let's select our section contact. Let's give it a padding top and bottom of 0. This is top should be 0, left and right should be 0, and bottom should be 5 rem. Let's set the background color to custom color. Transition should be 1 this time. Let's leave it as 2, so 2. Now let's copy this and paste it down here. We want to select the title. We want h1 Let's give it a color of white. And for the contact center, let's set display to grid. Also, let's set grid template columns to 1FR, 1FR. Gap should be 5 rem. Color should be white. And padding should be 0, 3 rem. Left and right. Within the form, let's select our H2 and give it a font size of 2 rem and a margin bottom of 1 rem. Let's head back to our browser and we should have this. Now, let's select the form again. We need this time the input and the form. We need the text area. Let's set font family to open sans, and we need sans serif. Let's set font size to 1.6 rem, padding to 1 rem and 0, text indent to 1 rem. Border should be none. Let's set border bottom to 1 pixel, solid #cc, and color should be white. Background color. Background color should be transparent. Border radius should be 0.5 rem. Margin bottom should be 1 rem. Width should be 100%. Outline should be none. Let's select our form. We need a left and a div. Display should be flex. Head back to our browser and we have this. Now let's select our form text area. We need the width to be 100%. Resize should be vertical, and margin bottom should be 2 rem. Height should be 10 rem. Now let's select the button form btn as form. Background color should be white. Let's set the color to our custom color. Transition to transition 2. Font size to 1.6 rem and font weight to 500. Cursor to pointer. Let's now select our right. So contact right. We want the background color to be white. Padding 2 rem. Display flex. And justify content should be center. Flex direction should be column. Let's give it a border radius of 1 rem. Now let's select the div within the right and give it display of flex, align items, center, color 212121. Let's head back to our browser and we have this. Now let's select the right, the div, content, and we need the h3. So let's put contact here, contact, and we want font size to be 1.6 rem. Let's copy this down and change the h3 to span. Font size should be 1.5 rem. Now let's select our icon. At first, let's use the div. Let's give it some margin bottom, not last child. Let's give it a margin bottom of 2 rem. Now our icon, we start with contact, right icon, font size will be 2.7 rem, color should be var custom, color, the spelling is wrong, color, and we want margin right to be 2 rem, and padding should be 1 rem, top and bottom, left and right should be 1.5 rem. Position relative. And let's copy this. We want the after. Let's set the content to empty string. Position to absolute. And top should be 0. Left should be 0. Width should be 100%. Height should be 100%. Border radius would be 50%. And background color would be var or custom color. And opacity should be 0.2. Let's save this and go back to our browser. And we have this nice icons here. Now let's write some media query. Max width of 768 pixel. Let's select our contact container, contact center. Let's give it a grid template column of 1 FR. And let's select our contact center again. We want the right, this align should be left. Now everything is intact. Let's go to our HTML and here we have our footer. So we start with footer and a paragraph in it. Use at copyright 2021 and my name. Let's go to our CSS and here we have our footer. So we say footer. Let's give it a background color of var custom. Color should be FFF. Padding should be 3 rem and 0 left and right. Text align should be center, and border top should be 1 pixel. Solid var border color. Let's go to our browser and we have this. Now it's time for our scroll to, and it is working already. And let's go to our JS and write the code for the scroll to functionality. So we say scroll to, and here let's get all our links to be equal to, we want document dot query selector, or we are going to select all links with the class of scroll link. So let's go to our HTML and set the class. So with our links, hold Alt and click, now hit space. Let's write scroll link. Let's head back to our JavaScript and let's select all the links. We are going to map through them. Say link. Here, let's add event listener to the link. We want a click event, and let's prevent default so that when we click, nothing happens. Now here I'm going to get the ID from, so e.target.get attribute, and this attribute you're going to look for the hrefs. You're going to slice it by 1. Then our element should be equal to document dot get element by ID, and we want ID. So let's console log element, console.log element. Let's make this bigger. So when we click, we should get the element, the section we want to scroll to. When we click, we have the portfolio, contact, we have the about, and here we have the home. Let's head back to our JavaScript, and what we are going to do is cons. Okay, for now, let's get our position. Position should be equal to element dot offset top minus our nav height. We wrote this nav height at the top. Now window dot scroll to, we want the top to be position and left should be 0. After scrolling, let's move the class of open from nav list. Now let's head back to our browser, and when we click this, we should scroll S to about, section, portfolio, blog, contacts. Let's go back to our header, and we are done with everything. Let's head back to our index.html. We are going to add our animate on scroll. Now, in order to add our animate on scroll, let's head back to our browser and search for AOS. Let's click on the first link, and this is the library I'm going to use. We've already included the CDN. These are the various fade. So we have fade right, fade left, fade up right, fade up left, fade down right. So go back to your text editor and let's include this in the about section. So look for the about section, the first column. Let's give it a data AOS should be equal to, let's say, fade right. So fade dash right. So this will fade right, and let's give it a data dash AOS dash duration should be equal to, let's give it 1300. If you save this and go back to our browser and to the about, there won't be anything there because you have to initialize this in the JavaScript. So go back to your JavaScript and write AOS dot init. Let's call it. If you head back to our browser and scroll down, it comes in. Let's do the same for the second column. So let's copy this. For the second column, let's fade left. Let's go down to our services section, and the first column, let's fade up. To the second column, let's fade, let's fade up. So that let's change the first one to fade right, and the last column, let's fade left. Let's move to our portfolio. Let's fade everything up, and to the testimonial, the left, let's fade it up, and for the swipe at the right, let's fade it down. Let's move to our block section. The first column, let's fade it right. The second, let's fade up. Let's fade it down. The last one, let's fade it left. And the contact, the left side, let's fade it right, and the right side, let's fade it left. So let's remove this and change it to left. Now let's head back to our browser, and when you scroll up, so let's scroll down, we have the left side scrolling right and the right side scrolling left. You can see this animation, this up, right and left, and the whole section scrolls up. Nothing is happening to the testimonials. Okay, it happens. Let's go back to our blog. The blog, I'm not seeing it. Okay, this to the right, this to the left, and this up. And for the this to the left and this to the right. So that's it for this tutorial. If you like this video, make sure you leave a like, subscribe, and share this video.